Good morning to you all. I heard a shout out earlier for physicians, physician leaders, nurses, hospital administrators. So I just want, any lawyers in the room? Yeah, not so much. I'll be your lawyer for the day. So again, we're going to talk very, very quickly. We got 30 minutes. This is, how many of you have been involved in a root cause analysis sentinel event process? I figure many of you have. So it's okay. We're just going to review that really quickly and a couple of follow-up thoughts about that, and then I'll be back later today to talk to you more about that alphabet soup of medicine, EMTALA, HIPAA, and the like. This just says I'm not really your lawyer, only for the next 29 minutes. So this is a very brief recap, but I have some excellent resources at the end of my slides today, which if you want to know more or have a great resource for yourself for further study, you'll have that at the end of the day. So very quickly, what is a sentinel event? We all know it in our gut, but what's the legal definition of a sentinel event? Very, very important for you to know this. You can have an error and it is not a sentinel event. And you also could have a sentinel event when actually no one was hurt. There was no error. So it's not the same as an error, first of all. But it's something unexpected. There's some death or serious disability, something happens, or psychological injury, or even the risk thereof. So serious injury specifically includes loss of limb or function, which we would all recognize, but it's the risk thereof. You could have something happen. I'm going to give you an example in a minute where it's just a process problem that if that process is not corrected, someone will get hurt if they've not gotten hurt already. And they signal the need for immediate investigation and response. So the list, the magic list of what is a reviewable sentinel event is it is an unanticipated death or major permanent loss of function. It's not related, it's not the gunshot wound they rolled in with that kills them. It's something that happened about the treatment of that gunshot wound that ultimately results in their death. Suicide, including suicides after they leave the ED. That's a big one. That's a hard one to control, but that's a very, very important one, as we all know. Unanticipated death, that's really not likely to happen of a full-term infant. That's more of an OB issue. Abduction from an ED possibly could happen in your area. Discharge of an infant to the wrong family, again, that's more of a nursery, maternity ward issue. Rape, I hope not, right? That can unfortunately happen anywhere. Hemolytic transfusions could certainly happen in the ED. Wrong patient, wrong site surgery. It is the toughest nut to crack. I'll show you the incidents on this in a minute. We can't seem to fix that one, but again, not likely to be on your watch. That's a surgery problem. An unattended foreign object. Again, we cannot seem to get those numbers down. Hyperbilirubinemia. My husband's a pediatrician. He would choke if he could hear I was saying that. And also some radiology occurrences. So those are the big lists. Those are the reviewable events. And again, whether or not someone's injured or not does not mean there shouldn't be an appropriate analysis. So if the Joint Commission becomes aware that you've had a reviewable instance, they're going to want you to do a process called the root cause analysis. Now it says there they could become aware of it because of self-reporting, or they find out about it because a patient has notified them directly. They could find out it through the press. There's a number of different ways the Joint Commission could find out about this, but it's funny, it's not actually mandatory you report it. However, if they come to do the Joint Commission comes to do your annual review or your review for your hospital, would you really like them to find it out then, or would you like to have told them before? I'm sorry, when your wife says, "Oh, it's okay, we don't have to talk about it," that means you really need to talk about it. So when they say, "Oh, you don't have to report it," it's kind of like, yeah, right, report it. You don't want them to find it out on their own. So again, this is just a lot of blah, 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 blah. You have it in your slides. If you have 45 days from when you know a sentinel event happened to go through the process we're going to review real quickly. If you did not know at the time that you had a sentinel event, and then later you find out, you know what, that really was a sentinel event, now you have 15 days, calendar days, you get your weekends, but you don't get your weekends, 15 calendar days to get that process done. So the process requires you do something which most of you had your hands up. You're going to do a root cause analysis, and then, of course, there's other steps. Doing the analysis means nothing if you don't put it into action. Now, this is what I was saying about foreign bodies. This is the most frequently reviewed events that are coming into the Joint Commission. And if you look at this, the writing's pretty small on your slides, but again, foreign body, we're having a really hard time getting that down. That's pretty consistently across the top. Delay in treatment, wrong patient, kind of go back and forth. Suicide and fall are dead even across. But what I think is interesting about this chart, and this is very important to you in the ED, notice we're doing better on medication errors, criminal events is going up. The amount of criminal activity in the ED, as we all know, actually criminal events are now going out of the ED. We're having problems on regular med-surg floors as well. But it's just kind of interesting to see where are the events happening in terms of numbers in this country. So that's what it is. Who's responsible for this? Well, obviously, hospital leadership are the people, your compliance officer, your Joint Commission officer if you have one. But if you are responsible, if you're in a leadership role in the ED and something happens, of course, it's part of leadership to make sure that this process is done and done correctly so that we all can learn from that event. Inadequate leadership. I think this is very interesting. About half the time, if there's not an effective review and response to an event, it is actually about half the time, it's a leadership issue. What do I mean by that? I'm sure many of you have worked with these people. Something bad happens and the response is, what crisis? No one's gonna find out. Right? That kind of attitude. It's just going to blow over, or I will handle it. Don't say another word, I got it, right? You know they're not going to take care of anything. Number 5 is my favorite. Oh, that's why we have an attorney. They'll do it. Yeah, right. I'm unavailable. The media is out to get us. Going back to the previous speaker about that little scale he had, which I loved, and I've dealt with worse problems than this. So all of these are counterproductive attitudes which defeat the purpose of let's be professional and appropriate and legally compliant in dealing with this issue that's come to us. The why might surprise you. So far that's probably, again, review of things that you've been involved in. The why is interesting. Do you know why we are doing this? It's really not so much to be punitive. In a perfect world, if you can appropriately inspect and analyze an error or a near miss in your facility, and you have that in the data bank, you know what? You might prevent another hospital from having a similar occurrence. Maybe we can share information, and that's ultimately what these root cause analyses are supposed to be for, that we're sharing, hey, we really worked back on this problem. Guess what we found out? This is good information for everyone to know. So it really is supposed to be, and I know I sound like the one floating around in the room right now, but it is supposed to be creating a data bank where we can all share information. I just was saying about, I didn't necessarily match my slide there, but this again gets to the point about you're not required to report this, but you know it is more likely to become punitive if the Joint Commission finds out you were trying to withhold information. Okay, so this again just talks about this wonderful world where we can all share our near misses, all share our errors in such a way that it actually adds to the knowledge base of what it takes to run an efficient and safe emergency department. Okay, more words. So reporting sentinel events and their root cause analysis and action plans to the Commission broadens their sentinel event database. That's what I was talking about a moment ago. So what are those steps? What do you have to do? The first is the root cause analysis. Again, you have 45 days, so ideally you should be able to get this done in the first 30, if not a lot shorter than that. It's got to be comprehensive. It's got to be fair. It's got to be balanced. Frontline staff, you've got to ask the people who were there at the time what happened, but they've got to know it's safe to respond to that. What this is, and I'm going to address this more in a minute, is trying to get away from the mentality that if something goes wrong, who did it? Who are we going to hang up to dry? I think Sherry mentioned this in my introduction. I am a nurse. I was a nurse for 10 years before I went into law. And I used to be in the NICU, the neuro ICU at a very well-renowned, world-class facility here in the country. So this is a long time ago. I hate to tell you how long ago, but it was like the late 70s. And I want you to know something. In the neuro ICU of a tremendously busy ICU, the tubing that came off the IV was actually compatible with the tubing on the respirator. In a very busy moment, had I wanted to, I could have perfused someone's lungs. Why would we allow that kind of situation to even be possible given the amount of stress you're all under? So you all know this. But what would have happened in 1978 if I had pursued someone's lungs? I would have been victimized, right? It would have been my fault. I'm dumb, as opposed to we have equipment that's dumb. So we really need, that's what the root cause analysis is all about. Consider involving the patient and her family. And by the way, please have your lawyer at your elbow when you do that. But I think that it can be part of an appropriate response to a terrible event is to let the family know that you're very concerned. But again, it's going to depend a lot on the facts on the ground, and please, 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 not without attorney counsel. Okay, so we're looking for underlying factors. We're trying to go beyond who's the bad person and what made this happen. They want you to look at both special causes and common causes. So common cause, this is things that it's so inherent in the process that sooner or later someone's going to get hurt. Let me give you an example. Very, very, very busy ophthalmologist doing a series of cataract surgeries. And his assistant has lined up the patients for the day, and in that order, lined up the lenses they're supposed to have implanted. One patient doesn't show. All the lenses move down one spot. Yeah, everyone's not seen so good now because everyone got the next guy's lenses. That's true. Okay? That is so stupid. It's so inherently part of the process. I say BYO lens, right? Had the lens tied to the patient. But anyhow. All right, so that's a common cause. As opposed to looking at the special causes like, okay, but why do we do it that way? What is the way the lenses are marked? How do we, again, it gets much, much more into that obvious. It often appears in extreme points, such as a point beyond the control limits of the control chart, is actually something in the pattern. So we have to think very, very broadly, trying to fix what looks like an easy problem. But as I said before, if you're doing that, at this point, it's fine to figure out what happened, but you have to have an action plan where now they're very specifically, have it time-dependent, have it measurable. These are the steps we will take to make sure this never, ever happens again. And then, of course, you have to implement that plan, and you have to monitor that plan. And documentation's critical all along the line. You want to document your efforts so if it ever does become punitive, or if there ever is a question of you doing the right thing, you can show, well, of course we did this, and have it all well documented so people will appreciate that you've done the right thing. I want to get back quickly to this, where we're trying to move away from, which is the punitive, penalizing, disparaging a world of making a mistake in a medical community. The term of art is we want to create a just culture. So yeah, every single day, we all know clinical events happen. They occur in your system. An emergency room is again, a high-stress environment, more likely to happen than many other areas in the hospital. So what we have to do is not only is that a tragedy to the person who is hurt and their loved ones, it's a tragedy for the person who was involved in that care. As a nurse myself, and again, having been in a number of fine institutions, I was involved at some level, or at least witnessed, 3 patient injuries over the course of 8 years. And it's devastating to everyone. We know this. We know this. So we want to make sure that the culture, that the people of the facility, the nurses and the physicians and everyone involved in that patient's care has an opportunity to express their grief, their regret, their remorse, their commitment to do things differently in a safe environment that's not punitive. There's so many great resources on this. If you just put just culture in your search engine, you'll find a lot of great resources. But this is a free one that's available on the web, and it's actually an attachment to the resource I'm going to give you at the end of the program if you can't make out the title well enough. But I do think we need to be very cautious about this, because you have to take it heart before the heartbreak. There was a nurse in California. She was a NICU nurse and had I don't know how many years of experience, decades of experience, excellent nurse. And there was an error. She did make an error, an uncharacteristic error for sure, and a baby died. And when she didn't show up to work the next day, they found out she had committed suicide. I mean, again, it's just compounding. We got to make sure we're taking care of each other, because no one can say that they can't make a mistake too. So here we are, we've made a mistake. Do we or do we not apologize? It's funny, this whole idea of a medical apology has got a lot of current press, which is great. I love the movement. It's actually got a lot of press about 15 years ago as well. So let me share some thoughts and some resources about that. Does offering an apology make a difference from a legal perspective? Does it help to say, I'm sorry? Well, interestingly, yeah, and done right, done correctly, and in the right environment with the right people, it could very likely make a difference. This idea, as I said, has a couple of decades behind it. It actually, in the 80s, veterans, the VA system, as we all know, national system, but in Lexington, Kentucky, the VA hospital in Lexington, Kentucky, had a higher number of claims and the claims were more expensive than any other hospital in the VA system. So in kind of a crisis mode, this certainly didn't start as a study. It just started as how are we going to handle this? They started as early as in the 80s, changing the philosophy from let's round up the wagons and be quiet to let's talk about what happened and express regret or appropriate apology. And what they found out is actually claims plummeted. It became so successful that is what the entire VA system does now. They're very open about apology, and it all started with Lexington. As a lawyer in the room, let me also point out that the VA system does not work under the same medical malpractice tort system that you do, because the federal torts is very different than the state torts. So the VA system, more power to them, but in all fairness, they kind of have different levels or lengths of exposure than you do in the real world. Anyhow. Another frequently cited resource to how an apology can work came out of Vanderbilt. And again, this was not designed as a study. But what they found out, what's the date on this? It goes sorry, this is early 90s. I don't have the date right there. It was written up in JAMA. But it was in the 90s. And what Vanderbilt found out is they were tracking risk management events from an administrative point of view. Who are we getting the complaints about? My doctor doesn't listen to me. She doesn't come around. He won't answer my questions. She treats me with disrespect. And they were taking those complaints and they were mapping them on who was getting sued, and it was a startling correlation. Now, we all know this intuitively, but of course it makes a difference. Your communication and your in the patient satisfaction and people wanting to sue you, of course, go hand in hand. I always want to say something, though. You can be, first of all, can you be an excellent physician and get sued? Yeah. Can you be an excellent communicator and get sued? Of course. The fact you get sued does not mean you're not a great doctor, and it does not mean you're not a great communicator. However, if you're not a great communicator, the incidence goes up. That's the point to make. How many of you have heard of SorryWorks? It's a big organization nationally. It's been around about 15 years. You can just put SorryWorks again in your search engine. But again, it's a physician-driven organization that is trying very hard to get apologies more into the way we deal with tragic events, because they do happen. The results are so significant, and I love this. The statistics on how apology actually affects litigation and outcome of litigation, like even if there's a suit, it tends to be a lower amount awarded. Those statistics were so interesting that the insurance companies started adopting these practices themselves, Copic out of Colorado being the first. The reason I'm smiling about that is, who was it who told you not to talk to anyone when things went wrong? It was actually the lawyers. It was the lawyers in the insurance company. So the lawyers have always said, shh, don't say anything. And now they see the statistics and they're saying, you really should apologize, as if you wouldn't have in the first place if the lawyers hadn't scared you half to death, right? But this is starting to actually trickle down even to the legal world to recognize, you know what, it just makes sense. I do have a caveat on that in a minute. So I love this point. Michael Woods is a surgeon. This book's been out about 15 years, but it's a physician's plea for appropriate apology and communication and openness. And he does a very good job. And he has a lot of that Vanderbilt study and VA study will be in there, I'm sure. I'm sure they are. So nearly every other industry considers it not only fitting, but also an important part of professionalism and good customer service to express regret and offer a suitable remedy when a client is dissatisfied. So we need to do the same in medicine when we have these things we're calling sentinel events. Now, at the same time, this is a lovely gentleman who is a medical malpractice defense attorney in San Antonio. His point is, hey, this isn't a panacea either, but it's possible it could help. So here's my caveats as your lawyer for the day. Number one, please, 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 I am not saying, oh, this is so great, it really works, please apologize to everyone. All right? You need to be very careful about who's making the apology, again, where, under what circumstances, etc. But the first caveat is it's very possible that you could have a contract. Let's say it's a contract with an insurance company, your preferred provider or managed care contract, or whatever it is. It's possible that you having direct communications could affect that contract. But it also, by the way, is going to be possible that it's going to get your liability insurance carrier off the hook. Your liability, you need to make sure, again, your lawyer's at your elbow, because if you have direct, especially, please, if the suit has already been filed, you don't go back and say, I've been meaning to apologize. Because, again, it just creates a whole lot of problems. And, again, your liability carrier probably, liability insurance is just a contract. And probably in that contract it says no, absolutely no ultravirus communication directly with the plaintiff. So these apologies have to be done, again, with the consent and advice and participation of your counsel. You know, your lawyers really are working hard to help you. I know you might not believe me, but they are. Please don't make it harder. All right, you want to make sure you're helping them to assist you should a bad event help, not make it harder. But this will not be new news to your lawyer either, because the whole idea of medical apology, as I keep saying, has been around now for some time. So talk to them about how you would like to apologize and in what setting. If you do not want, I keep saying in what setting, you do not want the grieving family to go to the hospital boardroom. The hospital boardroom where they walk into the room and everyone's been talking and they're all wearing their white coats and they're sitting around the board table talking, and the minute the family walks in, everyone goes quiet. Yeah, that's not the way you make an apology. Apologies should be in the clinical setting. Apologies should happen actually in the ED. It should be where patient care is actually happening. It should be in a very quiet, reflective area where people have an opportunity to express their grief, ask their questions, be angry, whatever it is. It should not be on the fly. It should not be a cast of thousands. It should be probably done by the person who's most involved in that patient's care, with a possibly appropriate people in the room, one or two people in the room. But this should not look like a corporate event. But all of that was planned and was actively discussed with your counsel beforehand. And the last caveat I have for you is the attorney-client privilege is a very, very important part of your ability to express yourself freely and share things with your lawyer that you really need to get off your chest or discuss in order to be represented as best you can. But you can ruin that. So again, it gets back to what I said about contracts. You want to make sure that you're not having conversations directly with plaintiff, whatever. Stay with your attorney. Make sure you're protecting that privilege. Make sure you're protecting your contractual agreement. But talk to them about your desire to be openness. They might even suggest it before you bring it up. I promised you, and I have a couple minutes left, so I promised you I'll give you an outstanding couple of resources. This paper came through the Institute of Healthcare Improvement, and actually, both Sharon and I were so impressed with it. We've used it extensively in a much longer program that we're doing at the ACHE Congress last year and again this year. But this is a fabulous document that really walks through, and if there's anyone a physician you're working with in the process of root cause analysis that feels victimized by it, it may be something that you would like to share with them so they can understand a broader view of what you're doing. Although I will say I have two much shorter articles that would probably be good in that framework. But this is a fabulous white paper. It's available for free at that website. Excellent resource for all of you who are in leadership positions that could be called upon to do a sentinel event, root cause analysis, etc. One of the things I love about that paper is it has extensive appendices included in the paper. You can just click on the web. Here's just a list of the appendices, but it is the Just Culture paper with the purple cover that I showed you is one of them. A lot of people very generously shared specific events and their facilities and how they managed it as examples. Hundreds of pages, I'm sure, in these appendices. So again, very, very good, or appendices, I guess. Very, very a great resource for leaders. And these are from that paper to synopsises of that paper, which again, for the physician who feels victimized or whatever, these might be much easier to share as part of trying to build a teamwork approach to dealing with an issue that arises. Because again, they rise in all institutions, and they rise no matter how careful or competent you are as a physician. I actually have a couple of minutes left. Does anyone have a thought, a comment, or a question? Please, in the back. There's a mic right here. I barely. Oh, thank you, sir.
It's better this way. There you go. In your slide, sorry works.
Yes.
You left out the part about the coalition offering cash up front. I'm not sure exactly what that means or how it's gauged or who does it.
Okay, thank you, sir. And you're right. I was going very quickly through this. So there is part of this. Thank you. I meant to give an example earlier, and thank you. I went by that. So cash up front. Now, you can't pay, it's not paying off patients. All these various different studies I've talked about mention that, so I'm glad you brought it up. It's not just paying them off. It's not slipping them money. But let me give you a brilliant example. There was a woman who had abdominal surgery. There was an absolute, undeniable mistake made in that surgery. She was going to be fine, but she was going to have to stay in the hospital for a longer time with subsequent surgeries to repair the problem. In this concept of working with the family, what they found out is this woman was two things: an avid gardener. And one of her concerns was her garden was going to die. Brilliant, just hire a professional gardener, thank you, to take care of the garden during that extended stay. And the second, it turns out she had no family members. Her only family was a son across the country who couldn't afford to be there. Brilliant again, fly the son in. Let's make this easier. So money spent in that way, and yes, maybe it is cash up front, but again, not just buying them off, but as part of trying to come up with some way to address the issue human to human as opposed to going to the courthouse. I was involved in a case of a child who died, and I want you to know that the hospital The kid was an avid baseball fan, and the hospital put money towards improving a baseball stadium. You know what I'm saying? It's like, wouldn't you rather spend your money that way? So again, it's kind of that idea, but a lot of it comes through mediation, a lot of other things come in there. It's not paying people off, but is it possible there's something we can do that might have a price tag, but it is going to be mutually agreed upon as an acceptable settlement to something no one want happen? Is that a fair response to your question? A
meaningful cash up front.
Yes, thank you. It's got to be meaningful. It's not a nudge, nudge, wink, wink. I'm just going to let you be quiet, right, go away. Thank you for making that, because that's very, very important.
Anybody else?
Okay, and there's one more here too.
And any insight into getting a handle on the ease at which you can make an error with computer order entry, and how frequently that might be occurring with wrong patient?
Wrong patient and with a computer, and so how easy it can make an error, like
you're just clicking on the wrong patient and ordering the wrong test treatments. Yeah, computers aren't panacea
either. I'm going to get back to, if I could, we're going to do all of health law in 30 minutes this afternoon, and it kind of comes up in the context, if I could, about high tech. So can I get back to computers on that?
Sure.
Because they're not perfect. And if I can have one more second, there's one more here. Thank you. Sherry has it.
What's your opinion on apologizing or letting patients know about errors that don't actually cause any harm? Like, they don't know that something happened, but we know that something happened. Yeah, really interesting. By the way, I love it when people actually ask for my opinion. So, supposed to be forcing it on them. Here's the problem. You don't know what's going to happen. Okay, by the way, I was a nurse for 8 years. Did I make medication errors? Of course. I'm not perfect. So let's say I make a medication error. Whew, thank goodness. The patient's fine, right? But it was clearly an error. Let's say that patient 2 days from now has a catastrophic event in the hospital, and now there is a lawsuit. We know that medication error had nothing to do with what happened 2 days later, but I promise you the family is not going to understand that, nor is the plaintiff's lawyer. If they can find that error, because they're looking at all the medical records, it's just like gravy for them. So do you see, that's one of the problems. It may not have had an impact, but the fact that you did not disclose it not only fundamentally changes how the family looks at it, it fundamentally changes how the jury looks at it. Because now the plaintiff's lawyer says, well, they didn't tell you anything about that error. Why should we believe them about this one? See what I'm saying? So it really, a full disclosure, full transparency. There's some legal reasons why that's good. I'm not telling you to diss your lawyers, right? I'm just saying, yes, a transparency across the board is probably good risk management also. You probably, as a lawyer, you can probably talk to your in-house counsel about how we're going to handle those minor errors, injuries where no one's injured, and have some kind of standing policy about it, because they're going to charge you an arm and a leg every time you call. No, just kidding. But also you want to have some sort of understanding about how that's going to be documented appropriately, okay? And again, is it 2 aspirins or is it twice as much digits they're supposed to get? There's always scales. All right?
Sarah,
thank you so much. Yeah.
Sarah, not every state has an apology law.
Right.
And so it's probably pertinent that you know whether your state has one of these. It's also important to know that the nuances of the apology laws, because in California, it's okay to say I'm sorry. It's not okay to say it's my fault. And there's such a logical extension from I'm sorry, it's my fault. As soon as you say it's my fault, that is not part of the apology law in the state of California, and that is admissible in your trial.
Yeah, so thank you. Yeah, state apology laws again. But thank you again. And you can make an apology in states that don't have an apology law. And as I was brilliantly just said, you can make an apology in one of the states that does and still blow it. So again, they are assistance, but it does not mean half the country can't make apologies. It's just all, in both sides, I would say do it with your lawyer with some involvement of your insurance carrier. Is that fair?
Good.
Okay, how are we doing?
And in the book that Sarah talked about, the Michael Woods book, there's pages and pages of scripting that would help you, because it really is, I do believe you have to be careful in how you approach it. And the Sorry Works Coalition even has some words that they feel are appropriate to use when you're talking about mistakes, and words that they feel are not. Words that they feel are inflammatory, and words that they feel are more conciliatory.
Can I just leave you with the best example of that? There was a surgeon who was doing back surgery in Texas, and nicked an artery. I think it was I'm not the doctor, I don't know, but it was an undeniable error that left the patient a paraplegic. Grieving family around the bedside of the grieving patient, and the physician walked in, the surgeon walked in and said, "I've always wondered what kind of idiot would make a mistake like that. I guess I know now." Just pull out your checkbook. You are so going down, right? So we all, good or bad. I see I'm out of time. Thank you so very, very much. I'm going to go off stairs. I came up no. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
I'll see you later this afternoon.